Okay, so we have our paints ready to go. What I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about dry brushing technique, because that's what I used on this particular project. You, of course, can do anything you want, but this is fun, and some of you may have experience already with this from stenciling or other kinds of artwork that you've done. So, turn it over onto the back. The back exists partially for practice. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with the lightest color. This really, really super light yellow. And you're going to wipe off the paint after you've gotten it onto your brush. It seems counterproductive, but it's not. You're going to wipe the paint off, because any amount that looks like it's actually there is probably too much. And what we're going to do is we're going to start at the base of the petals with the lightest color. So it's just like this, it's small strokes, and you just gently move it up from the base of the petal to maybe the center of the petal. And if you have some white showing through, even better, because it kind of gives it character and it gives it depth and highlight without you actually having to go in and paint it. The next step in that would be maybe to take a little bit brighter yellow and do the same thing. Fill your brush, and then I'm going to take a little bit of the darkest color we're going to use for the petal, and I'm going to put that on the brush, and then I'm going to wipe the whole thing off. So what I've got is the next step, a little brighter yellow. If you're afraid to mix colors, you can get an orange, and then mix it in with this red, and then you take here, and you can see this even better because it's darker. You take this and you mix it into the yellow, which should create orange. And if it's too heavy-handed, that's what the back is for. The back is for practice. So you can always go back. You can always add a little bit more of the lighter color. And if the colors mix on the brush, that's great. And you can just kind of keep going and doctor it up. And then you go with the darkest color all the way to the end of the leaf, or petal, I guess I should say. Always wipe off. And just work to the end. Now, I think this is too heavy-handed myself, so that's what you're trying to avoid. And I want to say that a great trick is to take hand sanitizer. You never really, when you're dry brushing, it's the kiss of death to rinse your brush, because then you get water in it. This paint is used with no water for a dry brushing technique because it defeats the whole purpose. So you just take your brush and you clean it with hand sanitizer, and then use your rag or cloth, whatever you're working with. Clean your brush off, and you can start again. And it takes some practice. In that usually your work ends up with too much paint at first, and which is why having the back to work from is great, because in the end, if the back looks terrible, you can always just paint over it. It's not really a big deal. And you might even want to go all the way up to the end of the petal, and before you, with the lightest color, before you even attack it with another color. And it may not, in this case, it doesn't even show up that much. I don't think I would bother with the second yellow. And then you go to your darkest color. Get it on there, wipe it all off. And from about the middle on, with a very light touch, a very light touch. And then what's nice about this is, especially with fall colors, it'll make the petals look like they're maybe transforming towards fall temperatures, because they're getting maybe a little redder, a little browner. And you can always even take a touch of your red, mix a little brown into it, and then do the edges up in here into it brownish red, so it looks like it's really fading. I wanted this to look more like a sunflower that had some kind of crazy colors to it, sort of a fantasy sunflower. So I didn't add brown, but depending upon how you're going to be using these, you can make 3 of them and use them for a tablescape at Thanksgiving or something like that. So you might want to think about their purpose while you're creating them. And then you can just go back in if you feel like your yellow's too heavy, and just drop in some more color. And just keep practicing on the back until you feel really confident. Remember, it's not the end of the earth. If you mess up the whole entire front, to your way of thinking, it doesn't even come out close to what you'd hoped for, or to a dry brush technique, you can always just go back and paint the whole thing white again and start over. And it dries pretty fast because it's acrylic. That's one of the great things about this. You might want to, for the center, on the back, you might want to practice with one kind of solid color, just and then mix in whatever other colors you want to use. The red, orange, brown, just because you have a nice big expanse of space there. So you might want to try it out on that space before you even hit the petals. Go with the base, the foundation piece of the lantern on the back side. And one of the things you're going to notice is, because the paper clay has texture to it, unless you've sanded it like crazy, but even still it's going to have a little texture. The texture will show up with the dry brush, more so than it would if you covered the whole thing fanatically. So that's really the dry brush technique for starting, and all I can say is practice, practice, practice. I even keep a couple of I might have a piece like this around that's just a paper clay piece that I was experimenting with, and I put a solid color on it, and now I'm dry brushing here to see what the effect is, just to kind of practice. So sometimes I have some pieces sitting around that aren't intended for anything but just to have fun, experiment, maybe sculpt something and then later paint something and kind of see what happens. And you can practice on those as well if you don't feel brave to attack the back of your candle lantern yet. Okay, so I will carry on in a minute with the next step.